Okay, we're going to be learning to draw this trimester with AutoCAD, and the reason why we're learning AutoCAD is we can sort of emulate traditional drawing techniques and really get to understand two-dimensional drawing, and at the same time learning a digital tool that allows us access to data that we can share across 3D modeling software and other things. So it might seem a little weird at first, but trust me, it makes sense. So if you're opening AutoCAD, you might have downloaded a student version or you're on the school's computers. In this case, I am using AutoCAD Architecture 2015, and there is a slight difference between AutoCAD 2015 and AutoCAD Architecture 2015. So if your screen doesn't look exactly like mine, that might be part of it. But anyway, we're going to be using 2015. You could be using 2016, which we might have downloaded. I don't know what the differences are. They're generally not huge differences, so it should still work. So you should open up to a screen similar to this. Now the most important thing to remember when starting a drawing is to start with the right template. So rather than just going to any type of new drawing or clicking any of these here, we're going to go and don't use this start drawing button, this big drawing button here, because I don't know if it'll use the right template or not. So I'm going to show you what to do. So we'll go to templates here and click this down arrow to pull down a list of possible templates to use. This is potentially overwhelming, but there's only one we want. It's called AEC Model Metric STB, and I'll explain in a later video what the difference is between STB and CTB, but right now just know that you want the one that says STB and make sure that's what we're using. So AutoCAD will open up. It'll look like it does here. You'll see all of these different menus. If you're using AutoCAD Architecture, you'll have doors and windows and a bunch of fancy elements that we're not going to use, so we're going to close that. This is the properties palette, which we will use. You can float it, but if your screen's probably larger than mine, what I'm going to do is just right click here and say allow docking. I've right clicked on that edge there, and for the sake of this video I'm going to dock it into the side here. That way we can see what AutoCAD is doing through the properties here while we're drawing within the canvas here. Now, it works very similar to most programs. I'm not going to go into full details. I'm showing you the minimal amount at this point in order for us to quickly start drawing and get into it. You also notice this command box kind of floating there. For very old school AutoCAD users like myself, we like to type all of the commands. But if you're using it from scratch, we don't need that, so I'm going to close it. It gives us an opportunity to open it up again at some other point if we want. And that's really what we want to be looking at as we're starting to draw. So I'm going to go through just two minor things that we're going to use in order to get us moving. Right? So the first thing we're going to do is use layers. Like most software, everything has the ability to put objects or items, whatever you're drawing, on layers, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to establish some layers for ourselves here by going to the layer properties, and it'll open up what's called the layer manager. Don't want it to dock. See how it says layer properties manager here? All right, so right now in this file we have two layers, a zero layer and one called depth points. These will always come in. Now another key thing to look at here is I can tell whether this is an STB file or a CTB file based on one important factor here. So in my layer managers where it says plot style here, I want there to be normal names. If there's color names listed here, you're in the wrong file. Get out and go back to the metric STB file. This will be extremely important later on when we're trying to actually get some output from here. Alright, so for now we're just going to come in here and create a few layers for us to use to start drawing the elevation of our wall. So I'm just clicking this button here, which is a new layer. I'm going to have a new one here, and I'm just going to put some random, not so random, names into it. Now the important thing to look at is the name, which we can put as anything we want. The color, it does not matter. The color will not matter, so you can just choose any color that you want to kind of differentiate one layer from another. So I'm just randomly choosing a color. And then what may matter, and what will matter later, is line weight. So we're really setting our colors, and encourage you to use different colors for different layers so that when you're drawing on the screen, you can tell what layer something is on by the color. You'll be identifying it visually that way. And here we'll go to line weight. Now you can see it offers tons and tons of line weights, and this is based on millimeters. So up to, you can see a 1 millimeter line, that's the printed output. It's really rare that we're printing out something that thick. So something like a ground line, for now I'm going to put it 0.5 millimeter and say OK. So I'm setting these now just while I'm making the layers. They won't really play any importance till we actually print though. Alright, so let's make a couple more. I'm going to call one brick. This will just be the bricks that we're using. And just for fun, we'll make it a nice kind of red. And we know this is going to be a fairly thin one, so I'll just pick something kind of randomly. These are all changeable later, so I'm just picking them now in order for me to be able to use them. I'm going to make another one called construction. And just like we were drawing by hand, we'll make construction lines. And I'm going to put this on very similar. I'm using this blue, and the reason why, you can see it's here, the 140, is AutoCAD will default to many of their non-printing layers, which is what this is going to be, to this color. Alright, so I'm making this 140, and you'll see this little printer icon here. I'm going to click that, and it now has the circle with the line through it. That means it will not print. I don't want this line to print. I want to just be able to draw on the screen and use it. Right, and I'll make one last layer. I may or may not use it. Call it outline. And be careful when you're doing this, because it will remember your last setting. Notice it's picking up the same line weights and picking up the last setting. So I actually want my outline to print. And I'm going to change this to a different color, somewhere in the yellow-green spectrum. Right, it doesn't matter to me which one it is. The check mark here means the current layer, right? And I can set the current layer by using this button up here. So let's say right now I want to draw construction lines. I'll set that to the current layer. That's a check mark. That means as I start to draw, let's just draw a real quick line. It's going to draw a line on that layer. So if I select this, and this is why we have the Properties Manager open, you can see that it's on the construction layer. And it's doing its line weight and colors by the layer. We want to control absolutely everything by the layer, so do not change anything over here unless at some point I specifically tell you to. Just use this for an informative feedback, not to change any properties, and that will become clear at some point. We want all of our properties to be controlled by the layer itself. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to look at is snaps. Right? Our snaps are what allow us to snap from one piece of geometry to another. And so as you see me drawing here, see that green snap show up? It's allowing me to snap to the end of this line or to end of that line. And depending on the snaps that are picked, I can snap to something else. It's also got inferred snaps. See how it's trying to snap me to 90 degrees. So it's got these inferred snaps will allow me to kind of snap and put that and draw. And the nice thing about AutoCAD is the line will continuously draw until you either escape out of it, which is I'm about to do, or hit the enter button, or hit the spacebar button. So you'll see a lot of experienced AutoCAD users with their pinky on escape and their thumb on spacebar, because the spacebar acts as an enter, which will repeat the last command. So if I hit spacebar, you'll see I'm able to start drawing the line again immediately. Hit spacebar again, I end that. Right? So we'll get to all these tools in a second. I'm just showing you how some of this works. Selection, learning to select objects in AutoCAD is very key. Notice if I start from the right and move to the left, I have a green square or green window with dotted lines. Right? That means something very different than if I move toward the right. Right? These are selection windows. If I use the blue and solid selection window, the objects have to be completely inside of the window to get selected. So you can see it's giving me a little bit of feedback. It wants to select this and this because it's completely in the window, and then it'll select that. So you'll see these objects are now selected, and I can delete those. Right. If I use the crossing window, what's called a crossing window, starting from the right and moving to the left, then the objects just have to cross within that window or on the edge of it. So you can see I can select these that are not totally in the window, but they're crossing. Right? An experienced AutoCAD user will be able to intuitively start moving from one direction to the other to learn to select objects. Like, see how I can select just those interior two very quickly by doing this. If I were to try to do it this way, it would be much more difficult. I could, and then I can come in with Shift and use the same thing to kind of take them out of that selection set and then do whatever I want with that geometry. So that's a pretty quick overview on how to select objects. Alright, so let's go to the snaps, which I wanted to cover. We saw an end snap, but you can see here, if I select this pull down arrow here, we have access to many other types of snaps. So end snap was on, the midpoint was not. So let's say I draw this line again and I want to snap to that midpoint, I can turn that on. That way if I draw another line, you can see it want to snap to the middle or to the end. And there's graphic feedback as to where it wants to snap. All right, so I have options for many other things like center. A node is essentially a point, the quadrant of a circle, intersection, extension. I don't know what it is, so I don't use it. But the most important ones that I usually leave on are endpoint, midpoint, center, node, quadrant, and I leave these on because it's really rare that they're there, but they're nice to have them there when you want them, and perpendicular. Sometimes I'll add nearest, but I'll show you another trick to use that in a second, and I'll show you what it actually means. But these snaps will allow us to precisely start drawing geometry from one to another. So you'll see if I start a line here and I want to make it perpendicular, that's a perpendicular snap, that snaps there. That means that will now be 90 degrees. So it's very easy to start snapping and getting very precise in AutoCAD as we're drawing. Alright, so with that I'm just going to show you a few more commands because I want this to be a quick video, and I can see I'm already at 12 minutes, which is long. This is the origin, so this is an x-axis and a y-axis, so just like any other computer software we draw mathematically if we want to, but you don't have to. You can think of it essentially as a blank canvas. If it bothers you, you can turn the grid off. By default, the snap to grid is on. I'm going to turn that off. What that means is it's trying to snap to grid points that are spaced here, and it gets a little annoying, so I'm going to turn that off. Alright, so what I'm going to do very quickly right now is introduce a few key tools, and then that will be it. The first one I'm going to use, and I'm going to try to do it like through the buttons up here. So instead of typing L enter, which is what I was doing, I'm going to come up here and go to the line tool and use what's called a construction line. Now this has two benefits, which I'll show you here in a second. I did something really bad. Let me escape. I'll use Control 9 to bring up the command line. This gives us feedback as we're working, and or right click on the object snap button. You'll see I go to object snap settings. This is a quick way to set some of the settings, but if I click this, you'll see a dialog box open, and it'll come to the object snap tab. What I want, and the reason why I did this, is I want something that's called dynamic input. So I'm going to come to dynamic input here, and you'll see it's all off. Well, not all off. There's some of these options are not in use. So I want all of these options on, and I'll show you why in just a second. Right? This gives me feedback at the cursor, dynamic, and the ability to input at the cursor. It also allows me to get rid of this command line. So if I get rid of that, now when I start, let's say, a line command, see how I'm getting the feedback that would normally be on the command line right at the cursor. So it says specify the first point, and I can specify it numerically just by typing in 0. You can see how that was highlighted blue. If I hit tab, I can go to the next one and hit 0 again, and then hit enter. You can see how that started the line at the origin. And now you can see as I'm moving, because of the dynamic input is on, I've got options that appear on the screen. So it says specify next point, and what that little icon is the down arrow, which will bring up a list of options. So for the line, there aren't that many options, but you'll see as we move into other commands, there will be some options. So let me go back to the construction line. So now that I have feedback here, it says select line work under cursor or enter to select points. What that means is it's going to try to make a construction line essentially an infinite line on geometry that already exists, or we can do it by selecting on 2 points. And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit spacebar. And now you'll see it'll want me to select 2 points. So it gives me this little graphic feedback. And what I'm essentially doing right now is creating a ground line for the wall. So when I click the second time, you'll see I now have an infinite line in the screen. And I'm moving in and out with the wheel, zooming in and out, and clicking the middle button or the wheel to pan to move this thing around. So learning to navigate quickly is key. So you see I've actually made an infinite line. I can use this for the ground, right? And the other thing that it makes the construction line nice is if I select this line, you'll see it's actually put it on its own layer called GANO non-plot. It just basically stands for General Annotation Non-Plot, meaning it won't print. And I'll get into, well, we'll probably never get into those, but if you're curious, you can ask me. All right, so now I can draw accurately. And what I'm going to do is start doing that with some other tools. I'll introduce you to another line that I like to use called the extended line. So the construction line is similar to the extended line in that it gives you the ability to select existing geometry or 2 points. If I type XL, and this command is not up in this toolbar, which is why I'm doing it. You can also see with the dynamic input on, as I start to type, just like in Rhino, the commands will come up. And if I hover over these, I'll get tooltips. And if I hover long enough on some of them, I'll get extended tooltips. So that'll tell me that that's that, and then it'll tell you how to use it. And that's what I want, is the extended line. So the nice thing about the extended line is if I go to the options, I can make a horizontal one, a vertical one at a set angle, one that bisects 2 lines, and one that's just an offset. So for now, I'm just going to make a vertical line, and I'm just going to drop it anywhere in space, and then hit escape to get out of there. So you see I now have the ground and maybe the first edge of a wall. Boy, this video is getting long. All right, we know the distance of our wall, and the reason why I'm using extended lines right now is because we don't know like the zoom factor of this. I don't know where 1 millimeter or 1 meter is, but everything we draw forever from now on in your entire life in AutoCAD or any software is full scale. Right? So I know the wall is 7 meters long, so I'm going to use a command called offset. So up in here under modify, you'll see offset here. I start that, and it wants a distance. So and there's options. All right, so I'm actually going to set, oops, start it again, a distance of 7,000 millimeters. That's the other key. We also always draw in millimeters in AutoCAD. So now I know kind of what the scale of this is. And then I'll run the offset again of 3,000 millimeters. And now I have an outline of my wall. All right, so pretty easily done. I don't have to, just with some offsets. Now what I'm going to do is make this a little bit cleaner. So I'm going to trim these. There's a command called trim, which is TR, or it's probably one of these, and this is there's a difference between an AEC trim and the trim. We don't want the AEC trim. That's for architecture things. We want just the natural trim. So either select it up there, how I did it with the pull down arrow. The easiest way is to start typing it in. TR usually means trim, and then hit enter. Now it wants to select objects that you're going to trim back to. Or the easiest thing that I do is, see how it says select all there? Just hit enter again, and now as I click on items, it'll trim back to the next line. The other really nice thing is if, well, let's just do it. I can use a window to do it as well. So I'm trimming these back. See how I can use a window to cross over two lines, and it'll trim that back there. So I've quickly generated my wall here. Now these are all on construction layers or non-plotting, so I might actually change those layers. So I'll select these, and where it says layer, it says varies. That's because one's a construction line and one was an extended line that we used. And I'm going to change this to outline. So now we have sort of this green, and I have the ability to start playing with this. Now, for the sake of the drawing today, I'm just going to trim back these here. Alright, and I'll tell you why in a second. Well, I'll tell you why now, because I'm going to offset these, and I don't want them hanging all the way out. And I'll come back in later and draw that ground line, but we always want that ground line in there. So let's say I want to use this line. I'm going to change this to the brick layer because I'm going to start making my rows. Right? So going to the dimensions of my brick, I know they're 76 millimeters tall. So I'm going to start the offset command again, type in 76, and what's pretty easy is I can just select the line and select the line I want to offset it to. So I can quickly go through and actually start generating these rows of patterns that I want. Right. If you want to consider the mortar, and you don't have to at first, right now we're just going to learn the software and get comfortable. If you want to include the mortar, then you would have to erase these, start the offset command again, change it to whatever you want the mortar is, usually something like 10, and then you'd have to keep doing offset, change it back to 76, right? So that's one way to do it. Of course, there's always a fast way to do things in AutoCAD, and that's what I'm about to show you. I'm going to erase this. So I know that this line here, these lines will create the top edge of my brick in the mortar. So I'm going to select these and start the copy command. So copy command is here. Right. Now let's look at what it's asking for. It wants a base point. Where are you going to copy from? I know if I'm really clever here and I say copy these lines from this point, I can then move up here and actually copy those two lines up there. Right? So let's give it a try. Using my endpoint snap and going there, you can see I'm now copying this up fairly quickly. Right? Pretty easy, right? So now I might actually create the vertical line. So I'm just drawing that line. It's on this layer, so it's going to do that. So I'm going to just select that one, put it back to my brick layer, and then use the offset command again to give me the stretcher length of this, which is 230. Right? I'll delete that line because it's not really good to have multiple lines on top of each other in AutoCAD. And then I could copy this over and continue to copy these lines. Another way will be to use this next command. I'll select this line and start the array command. The array command, I'll see if it's in here. Possibly is, but I'm not gonna take the time to look for it. Just start typing. It's the beauty of AutoCAD. All you have to do is start typing array. We'll go to, sorry about that. Let's start typing array. That's a setting. Anything that has a little wheel will change a variable. We don't want that. Let's just go to the array. I'm going to select this object. That's what I want to array. Array just means make multiple copies. I'm going to go to rectangular, and now it's letting me do interactively begin to array this, but I know what I want. So I can come over here and I can say I want my columns to be 230 millimeters apart. Oh, no, that's the number of columns. I'm sorry. I'm just going to guess at like 50. And I want them to be 230 millimeters apart. I want one row. So essentially I'm just taking this line and I want to copy it across the bottom. All right, so one row. And if I zoom out, I can see what it's doing. Right, so 50 is too many. Actually, now that I have it interactive, I can pull this back. Pull it back to there. Perfect. So close the array. Now I have all of my bricks there. This is of course without mortar. If you want to put mortar in between, I'm going to undo it. We will do it again, but I'll offset by 10 from here to here. And now I can array those two by selecting those, typing array, and it'll do it just as if I had selected that one line. Rectangular, 45 or so, 230 between, 1. It'll do 3-dimensional as well, but we're not doing that. Right. Come back here again. Just use that. Perfect. Nice thing also about AutoCAD is it remembers these, which means I can begin to change this. Sometimes that's annoying because you really just want access to those lines, so it's really easy to just select these and type explode. Explode will now turn these into individual lines, which is good. And I could now just take all of these and I'll hold shift and put these into the selection. One annoying thing about not shift, no, don't hold anything, about AutoCAD is if it's not on the screen it won't select it. So now I need to copy these up or array them up, but I want to only array or copy them every other row. Right? If I'm making a running bond, I actually have to repeat this, but offset shifted the length of the brick for the second row. And it might be as easy as, let me copy. A nice little trick is previous. If I hit P, it'll select those previous objects, and I'll copy them up here. Now I'll type move, which is this key here, and I'll select previous. Nope, we're going to have to actually select them. So I'll just carefully select them. And not everything is super easy. Sometimes you actually have to do some work. All right. And now I'm going to move all of these, and it wants to know where from. I'm going to pick anywhere in space, and then where to. I know that I want to move these half the distance of the brick plus half the distance of the mortar in this case. So that's 115 plus another 5 for the mortar, 120 units. All right, and now I actually have that perfectly in line there. So I'll have to just make one more copy of this one very simply by grabbing that endpoint and making that. And now I have the beginning of my running bond. So very quickly and easily I'm generating the geometry I need. So the last thing I'll do is maybe put, actually let's just take this line and we'll grab what are called the grips, these blue ones, pull that out for my ground plane, select that line, turn it back to the ground plane, and now I have the beginning of a drawing with layers. And I'm gonna stop there because this is already way too long at 28 minutes, but hopefully this is enough information to get you going.